Chicago ER nurse Mara Ellison vanishes after a double shift and wakes chained in a freezing basement, starving and forgotten. When armed men storm the cellar, she expects death. Instead, she meets Damian Moretti, the city's most feared crime lord, who cuts her chains with his own hands. Then comes the truth that shatters everything. Her kidnapper is Damian's younger brother. Now trapped between the man who destroyed her and the one sworn to burn his own empire for revenge, Mara must choose who to trust when both brothers want to own her fate. Stay until the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Banag. Rain hammered the empty streets outside Chicago Memorial Hospital like fists against glass. Mara Ellison pushed through the employee exit at 3:47 a.m., exhausted beyond words, her scrubs still damp with someone else's blood from a motorcycle accident 6 hours earlier, 28 years old and already feeling 50. Her second double shift that week. Rent was due. Student loans didn't care if she could barely stand. The parking garage stretched ahead like a concrete tomb, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Her sedan sat 3 levels down in the corner where she always parked because the monthly rate was cheaper there. Stupid. She knew it was stupid even as her legs carried her forward on autopilot, keys in her left hand, pepper spray in her right pocket, though her fingers were too numb from exhaustion to grip it properly. She'd worked 16 hours straight, saved 2 lives, lost 1. The old man with the heart attack who coded while she performed compressions until her arms screamed. Footsteps echoed behind her. Mara's spine stiffened. She didn't turn around, kept walking. Faster now. The sedan was 40 feet away. 30. 20. The footsteps matched her pace. Her heart kicked against her ribs. She fumbled with the key fob, thumb jamming the unlock button twice before the lights flashed. 10 feet. She reached for the door handle. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Mara tried to scream, but the sound died against a gloved palm that tasted like leather and chemical sweetness. She twisted hard, elbow driving backward into solid muscle. Her attacker grunted but didn't let go. Something sharp pierced the side of her neck, a sting like a wasp, then burning heat spreading through her veins. No, not like this. Her vision blurred at the edges. The parking garage tilted sideways. Her legs gave out and strong arms caught her before she hit the concrete. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed everything was a man's face hovering above her own. Young, handsome, smiling like he'd just won something. Then nothing. Mara woke to cold. Not the mild chill of air conditioning. Real cold. The kind that lived in your bones and made your teeth chatter even when you clenched your jaw. Her head throbbed like someone had taken a sledgehammer to her skull. Everything hurt. Her neck, her wrists, her ankles. She tried to move and metal clinked against metal. Her eyes snapped open. Darkness. Complete and absolute. She couldn't see her own hands. Panic clawed up her throat as she yanked her arms forward and chains rattled somewhere above her. Her wrists were bound. She pulled harder and pain shot through her shoulders. The chains were bolted to something solid overhead. A basement. She was chained in a basement. Help! The word ripped out of her raw throat. Somebody help me! Silence answered. The kind of heavy, suffocating silence that confirmed exactly how alone she was. Mara's breathing came faster. Too fast. She was hyperventilating. Focus. Think like a nurse. Assess the situation. She forced herself to slow down, to catalog what she could feel since she couldn't see. Concrete floor beneath her, freezing. She was still wearing her scrubs, but they were filthy now, stiff with dried sweat and something else. How long had she been unconscious? Her mouth tasted like copper, and her lips were cracked. Days? Her bladder was empty. Someone had been down here. The chains allowed maybe 4 feet of movement. She could stand if she wanted to. Could reach the floor. Couldn't reach the walls. She tested the bolts overhead by pulling with all her strength until her wrists bled and her shoulders felt like they might dislocate. Nothing. They didn't budge. Time stopped meaning anything down there. Mara counted seconds in her head until she lost track. Screamed until her voice gave out. Slept when exhaustion dragged her under and woke shivering when the cold became unbearable. Sometimes footsteps crossed the ceiling above her. Sometimes a door opened at the top of stairs she couldn't see, and someone came down carrying a dim flashlight. A man. Always the same man. The one from the parking garage. He brought water in a plastic bottle and cheap white bread that tasted like cardboard. Never spoke. Just watched her with those same bright, excited eyes like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Then he'd leave, and the darkness would return, and Mara would cry until she had nothing left. She tried talking to him the first few times. Begging, promising she wouldn't tell anyone if he just let her go. Her family would pay ransom. She was a nurse. She could help him if he was hurt or sick, whatever he wanted. He smiled wider each time and said nothing. After a while, she stopped trying. Stopped crying. Just existed in the cold and the dark and the slow realization that nobody was coming. Nobody knew where she was. The hospital probably thought she'd quit. Her apartment would be emptied by her landlord. Her phone was dead somewhere, probably at the bottom of Lake Michigan by now. She was going to die down here. The thought arrived with strange clarity one night. Or day, she couldn't tell anymore. While she was chained in the dark, counting her own heartbeats just to prove she was still alive. This was it. This was how her story ended. 28 years old, and she'd die alone in a basement without anyone ever knowing what happened to her. Mara laughed. Actually laughed. The sound came out cracked and broken, echoing off walls she still couldn't see. Maybe she was already dead. Maybe this was hell. Then she heard the explosions. The first blast shook the entire structure above her. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and Mara jerked awake from a half-sleep she didn't remember falling into. Her body screamed in protest, every muscle stiff, her wrists raw and infected where the chains had worn through skin. Another explosion, closer this time. Then gunfire, sharp cracks that sounded like fireworks, but Mara knew better. She'd pulled bullets out of enough bodies in the ER to recognize the sound of people trying to kill each other. Shouting erupted overhead, men yelling in voices rough with adrenaline and fury. Something heavy crashed to the floor, glass shattered. More gunfire, sustained now, a dozen weapons all firing at once. Mara pressed herself against the cold concrete floor and made herself as small as possible. Whatever was happening up there, she didn't want any part of it. Footsteps thundered across the ceiling, running. Then descending stairs with heavy boots that sounded nothing like the quiet steps of the man who brought her food. These were soldiers, or something worse. The basement door exploded inward. Light flooded the space. Blinding after so long in the dark that Mara couldn't see anything except white-hot brightness that made her eyes water and her head pound. She threw her arm up to shield her face, chains rattling. Jesus Christ! A man's voice, deep, controlled, absolutely furious. There's someone down here! More footsteps. Mara squinted through her fingers and saw shapes moving through the light. Black suits. Weapons. At least 4 men spreading out across the basement like they were clearing a crime scene. Then one shape separated from the others and moved toward her. Tall, broad shoulders. Moved with the kind of lethal grace that said violence was a language he spoke fluently. As Mara's eyes adjusted, his face came into focus through the harsh beam of a flashlight one of his men was holding. Mid-30s. Sharp jaw. Dark hair slicked back and soaked from rain. Designer suit that probably cost more than Mara's entire year of rent, now ruined with water and dirt and spatters of blood across the white dress shirt beneath his jacket. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Cold, utterly cold. The kind of eyes that had seen terrible things and done worse. He stared at her like she was a ghost. Mara stared back, too exhausted to be afraid anymore. If he was going to kill her, fine. At least it would be over. Get these off her. His voice cracked like a whip. Now! 2 men rushed forward with bolt cutters. The first chain snapped with a metallic shriek, and Mara's arms dropped like dead weight. She couldn't even hold them up anymore. Someone caught her before she collapsed completely. The man in the expensive suit knelt in front of her, close enough that she could see the muscle ticking in his jaw. Up close, he was devastating. Not handsome in any conventional way. Well, his nose had been broken at least once, and a scar cut through his left eyebrow. But power radiated from him like heat from a furnace. Who did this to you? Each word was precise, carefully controlled, like he was using every ounce of willpower to keep from exploding. Mara's voice came out like gravel. I don't know his name. Describe him. Young, maybe 25, brown hair, tall. She swallowed hard, her throat burning. He took me from a parking garage. I'm a nurse at Chicago Memorial. I just wanted to go home. Something flickered across the man's face. Not quite emotion, more like a fracture in that cold control. He turned to one of his men. Nicholas, check upstairs. Now. The biggest of the men, built like a tank with a shaved head and a gun that looked small in his massive hands, disappeared up the stairs at a run. The man turned back to Mara. Can you walk? I don't know. Try. He helped her stand and Mara's legs immediately gave out. She hadn't used them properly in months. How many months? 3? 4? Time had become meaningless in the dark. He caught her easily, one arm around her waist, and Mara found herself leaning against someone who smelled like expensive cologne and gunpowder. Get a medic, he snapped at another one of his men. And find out where the hell Luca is. Luca. The name landed like a stone in water. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. Boss, we found evidence upstairs. Photos. A lot of them. The man's entire body went rigid. Photos of what? Her. And others. The temperature in the basement seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mara felt the man's arm tighten around her waist. Not painful, but absolute. Like he was anchoring himself to keep from destroying everything in reach. Nicholas came back down the stairs holding a wallet. You need to see this. The man took it with his free hand, flipped it open, went completely still. Mara watched his face transform. The cold control shattered into something much more dangerous. Rage so pure and focused it could cut steel. When he finally looked up, his eyes had gone black. It's him, Nicholas confirmed quietly. His credit cards, his driver's license. He's been living here. Find him. The words came out flat, dead, 100 times more terrifying than if he'd screamed. Find him and bring him to me alive. I don't care what condition he's in as long as he's breathing. Nicholas nodded and gestured to the other men. They melted away like shadows, moving up the stairs in formation. Mara was left alone with the man who'd cut her chains, still holding her upright because her legs refused to work. What's your name? He asked. Mara. Mara Ellison. Mara. He said it carefully, like he was committing it to memory. My name is Damian Moretti, and I'm going to get you out of here. Moretti. The name echoed in her head. Even living in her own isolated world of double shifts and medical textbooks, Mara knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Moretti meant organized crime, meant the kind of power that made politicians nervous and police captains look the other way. Damian Moretti, the head of the family, the most dangerous man in Illinois. And he was currently carrying her up a flight of stairs like she weighed nothing. The mansion above the basement was chaos. Shattered windows, bullet holes in expensive wallpaper. Bodies, at least 3, sprawled in pools of blood that Mara's nurse brain automatically cataloged as fatal before she could stop herself. Men in suits were everywhere, weapons drawn, checking rooms with military precision. Damian carried her straight through the carnage to a black SUV idling in the circular driveway. Rain poured down in sheets, immediately soaking them both. He placed her carefully in the back seat and climbed in beside her. Drive, he told the man behind the wheel. The estate. Fast. The vehicle surged forward. Mara sat shivering in her ruined scrubs, watching the mansion disappear behind them through rain-streaked windows. Reality was starting to catch up with her in jagged pieces. She'd been rescued. She was free. She was sitting next to a crime lord who just shot his way into a building to save her. The man who took you, Damian said quietly. He wasn't looking at her. Was staring straight ahead with that muscle still ticking in his jaw. Did he hurt you? Mara understood what he was really asking. He never touched me. Not like that. He just kept me there. Chained, in the dark. Damian's hands curled into fists on his knees. How long? I don't know. Months? 3? 4? 3 months and 6 days, Damian said. That's when you disappeared. It made the news for 2 weeks, then nothing. Everyone assumed you ran away or were already dead. I thought I was dead too. He finally looked at her. Really looked at her. Not like the man in the basement who'd stared with those excited, hungry eyes. Damian looked at her like she was a person, A human being who'd been broken and needed to be handled with something resembling care. "The man who did this to you," he said slowly. "His name is Luca Moretti. He's my younger brother." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Mara's brain couldn't process it. Brother. The monster who'd chained her in the dark was this man's brother. She should be terrified, should demand he let her out of the car immediately, should do anything except sit there staring at him while rain drummed against the roof. "Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "I don't know." Damien's voice was raw now, the control finally cracking at the edges. "But I'm going to find out, and when I do, I'm going to kill him myself. Not I'll make sure he faces justice. Not I'll turn him over to the police. Just the simple, absolute truth. I'm going to kill him myself." Mara should be horrified, but all she felt was tired. So tired she could barely keep her eyes open. Her body was shutting down now that adrenaline was draining away. 3 months of starvation and dehydration and cold were catching up all at once. "Stay awake," Damien ordered, sharp enough to cut through the fog. "Mara, look at me. Stay awake." She forced her eyes open. "I'm trying." "I know, just a little longer. We're almost there." The SUV raced through Chicago's streets that Mara barely recognized. Her city looked different now, foreign, like she'd been gone years instead of months. Eventually, they turned onto a private road that wound along Lake Michigan, trees thick on both sides, until iron gates swung open and a massive estate appeared through the rain. Not a mansion, an entire compound. Main house lit up like a fortress, surrounded by smaller buildings and enough security to invade a small country. The SUV pulled up to the front entrance where at least a dozen men in suits were waiting. Damien was out before the vehicle stopped moving. He pulled Mara out after him and she felt her legs give out again. This time he just picked her up completely, carrying her like she was made of glass. "Get Dr. Reeves here now," he barked at someone. "And clear the east wing. Nobody goes in except medical staff." He carried her through doors that probably cost more than her car. The interior was all marble and dark wood, and the kind of wealth Mara had only seen in magazines. Everything was warm, the opposite of the basement, but she couldn't stop shivering. Damien took her upstairs to a bedroom that was bigger than her entire apartment. He set her down carefully on a bed so soft it felt like sinking into clouds. Someone appeared with blankets, thick, heavy blankets that he wrapped around her shoulders. "Dr. Reeves will be here in 10 minutes, Damien said, kneeling beside the bed so they were eye level. "He's going to check you over, run tests, whatever you need." Mara nodded. Couldn't quite speak anymore. Everything was hitting her at once. The weight of 3 months lived in darkness, the impossibility of freedom, and the strange, surreal horror of being rescued by the brother of the man who'd destroyed her. "Why did you come for me?" she managed finally. Damien's face was unreadable. "Because nobody deserves what he did to you, and because I've spent my entire life cleaning up Luca's messes. But this?" His jaw clenched. "This is different. You're going to kill him." "Yes." "Even though he's your brother." "Especially because he's my brother." Damien stood, and for a moment he looked almost human, tired, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with the gun holstered under his jacket. "Get some rest. You're safe here." He turned to leave, and Mara found herself calling after him. "Damien." He stopped in the doorway. "Thank you." He looked back at her with those cold, lethal eyes that had probably sentenced dozens of men to death. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Don't thank me yet. You don't know what I am." Then he was gone, and Mara was alone in a room warmed by soft light and expensive blankets, listening to rain hammer against windows that she could actually see through. She pulled the blankets tighter and allowed herself to cry, really cry, for the first time since the parking garage. 3 months in hell. And now she was trapped in the home of the devil's brother, with no idea if she'd been rescued or simply claimed by a different kind of monster. Outside the bedroom door, Damien Moretti stood with his phone pressed to his ear, rain still dripping from his hair, murder written across every line of his face. "Find him," he said into the phone. "I don't care if you have to burn Chicago to the ground. Find Luca and bring him to me before dawn." He ended the call and stared down at the blood still spattered across his white shirt, some of it from his men, most of it from Luca's hired guards who'd been stupid enough to stand between Damien and that basement door. His little brother had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and Damien was going to make sure he paid for every single second Mara Ellison had spent chained in the dark, even if it meant destroying the only family he had left. Dr. Reeves arrived 20 minutes later carrying a medical bag that probably cost more than Mara's entire nursing school tuition. Mid-50s, silver hair, hands that moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent decades patching up people who couldn't go to hospitals with questions. He didn't ask how she'd ended up in Damien Moretti's estate wearing filthy scrubs and chains marks around her wrists. Just set his bag down beside the bed and started working. Mara let him. Too exhausted to do anything except sit there while he checked her vitals, drew blood, examined the infected wounds on her wrists and ankles. She was a nurse. She knew what he was looking for. Dehydration, malnutrition, evidence of assault. The clinical detachment helped her float above the reality of hands touching her skin again. Severe malnutrition, Dr. Reeves said finally, speaking to someone behind Mara. She turned her head and found Damien standing in the doorway like he'd never left. Dehydration, multiple lacerations, some infected, no sign of sexual trauma. She needs IV fluids immediately, and probably 2 weeks of monitored recovery minimum. Set it up here, Damien said. Everything she needs. Mr. Moretti, she should be in a hospital. Oh, here. The word cut like a blade. Nobody knows she's alive except the people in this house, and it's going to stay that way until I deal with the situation. Dr. Reeves' mouth thinned, but he nodded. He'd clearly learned a long time ago not to argue with Damien Moretti about anything. Mara found her voice. I want to go to a hospital. Both men looked at her, Dr. Reeves with sympathy, Damien with something harder to read. You can't, Damien said flatly. You can't keep me here. I'm not keeping you. I'm protecting you. From what? Your brother's already... Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard and tried again. He's already done the worst thing he can do. I want to go home. I want to see my family. I want... Luca is still out there. Damien stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Dr. Reeves took the hint and busied himself preparing an IV line. My men are hunting him across the city right now, but until I have him in custody, anyone associated with what he did is a target. That includes you. I'm not associated with anything. I'm a victim. You think he sees it that way? Damien's voice was calm, too calm. You think a man who kept you chained in a basement for 3 months is going to just let you walk away and testify against him? The words landed like punches. Mara felt her hands start shaking beneath the blankets. She'd been so focused on escape, on freedom, that she hadn't thought past the next breath, hadn't considered what came after. Luca was still out there, the man who'd smiled while she begged, who'd watched her break apart piece by piece in the dark. He knew she could identify him, could describe every detail of his face, his voice, the way he moved. She was a witness, a liability. How long? Mara asked quietly. Damien understood immediately. Until he's dealt with. Days. Maybe a week. And then? Then you're free to go wherever you want, with enough money to disappear if that's what you choose. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. I need to start the IV. Mara held out her arm. The needle sliding into her vein felt like nothing compared to the one that had stolen her life 3 months ago. She watched clear fluid begin dripping through the line and wondered distantly if this was what being dead felt like. Floating, disconnected, watching your own life happen from somewhere outside your body. I'll have food sent up, Damien said. Start slow. Broth, bread, nothing heavy. Dr. Reeves will monitor you tonight. Where are you going? To find my brother. Something in Mara's chest tightened. And when you find him? Damien's eyes were flat. Empty. You don't want to know. He left before she could respond. Dr. Reeves finished setting up the IV and a monitoring system that looked like it belonged in an ICU, then settled into a chair beside the bed with a tablet. Get some rest, he said gently. You're safe here. Mr. Moretti doesn't make promises he can't keep. Mara wanted to laugh. Safe. She was trapped in a crime lord's mansion because his psychopath brother had kidnapped her from a parking garage. Nothing about this was safe. But her body didn't care about logic anymore. The warm bed, the IV fluids, the simple fact that she could see light, all of it dragged her down into sleep before she could fight it. She dreamed about the basement, about chains and darkness, and a man's voice asking her questions she couldn't answer, But this time when she woke up screaming, there was light. Real light. Morning sun streaming through massive windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. Mara lay there gasping, her heart trying to break through her ribs, and stared at the water stretching toward the horizon. Blue and gray and alive. The opposite of the black nothing she'd lived in for 3 months. Someone knocked softly on the door. "Come in," Mara said, her voice still rough. A woman entered carrying a tray. Late 20s, black hair pulled back in a tight bun, dressed in dark slacks and a white blouse that screamed professional. But it was the gun holstered at her hip that made Mara's stomach clench. "Good morning, Miss Ellison. I'm Sophia. Mr. Moretti asked me to check on you." "Where is he?" "Handling business." Sophia set the tray down on the bedside table. "Broth, plain toast, water." "Dr. Reeves left instructions for your diet. You need to eat slowly." Mara looked at the food and her stomach turned over. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten anything that wasn't stale bread dropped on a concrete floor. "I'm not hungry." "You need to eat anyway." Sophia's voice was firm but not unkind. "Your body's been through hell. Food is medicine now." Mara picked up the toast, took a small bite. It tasted like cardboard, but she forced herself to chew and swallow. Sophia watched her with the same clinical efficiency Dr. Reeves had shown, and Mara realized this woman had probably seen worse. Had probably done worse. "How long have you worked for Damien?" Mara asked. 5 years? Doing what? Sophia's smile was razor thin. "Whatever needs doing. Like babysitting kidnapping victims? Like making sure you stay alive long enough for Mr. Moretti to clean up his brother's mess." Sophia pulled a phone from her pocket and glanced at the screen. "He's requested you join him downstairs when you're ready. There's a shower through that door and clean clothes in the closet. Take your time." She left before Mara could ask any more questions. The shower was obscene, bigger than Mara's entire bathroom back in her apartment, with water pressure that felt like a massage and soap that smelled like expensive hotels. She stood under the spray until the water ran cold, scrubbing at skin that still felt dirty, no matter how hard she tried. The clothes in the closet fit perfectly. Soft cotton pants, a loose sweater, everything in neutral colors. Someone had taken her measurements while she was unconscious. The thought should have terrified her, but Mara was too numb to care anymore. Sophia was waiting outside the bedroom when Mara emerged. She led her through hallways that twisted like a maze, past rooms filled with dark wood furniture and artwork that probably belonged in museums. Men in suits nodded at Sophia as they passed, but their eyes tracked Mara with open curiosity. They descended a wide staircase into a foyer that looked like something from a mob movie. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, and Damien Moretti standing in the center of it all with his phone pressed to his ear and murder written across his face. He looked different in daylight, less like the controlled crime lord from last night, and more like a man who hadn't slept in days. His suit jacket was gone, white shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a tattoo that disappeared beneath the fabric. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He saw Mara and ended the call immediately. "You should still be in bed." "I've been in bed for 3 months, Mara said. "I'm done lying down." Something flickered in Damien's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. He gestured for Sophia to leave, and she melted away like smoke. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been chained in a basement for 3 months." The words came out sharper than Mara intended. "Did you find him?" "No." "So I'm still stuck here." "You're safe here." "I wasn't asking if I was safe. I was asking how long I'm stuck." Mara stepped closer, close enough to see the muscle ticking in Damien's jaw. "I want my life back. I want to go home. I want—" "You can't go home." Damien's voice was flat. "Your apartment was cleared out 6 weeks ago when you missed rent. Your belongings are in storage somewhere. Your job assumed you abandoned your position. Your family held a memorial service last month." The words hit like physical blows. Memorial service. They thought she was dead. Her parents, her sister, her friends, they'd buried her without a body and moved on. Mara's legs gave out. Damien caught her before she hit the marble floor. His hands were strong and careful, lowering her onto a bench against the wall. He crouched in front of her, eye level again, and for a moment he looked almost human. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know this isn't what you want to hear. They think I'm dead." "Yes." "I need to call them. I need to tell them. You can't. Damien's voice was gentle but absolute. Not until Luca is dealt with. If he finds out you're alive and talking to people outside this house, he'll use them against you. Your family becomes leverage. Do you understand? Mara understood. Hated it, but understood. Luca had already proven what he was capable of. If he knew she could destroy him, he'd go after everyone she loved to keep her silent. How long? She asked again. I don't know. My men are tracking every lead. He's using his connections to stay hidden, but he'll surface eventually. They always do. And when he does? Damien stood and the softness in his expression disappeared completely. Then I handle it. By killing him. Yes. He's your brother. He stopped being my brother the moment he put chains on you. Damien turned away, staring at nothing. Luca has been a problem for years. Small things at first. Bar fights, gambling debts. I cleaned them up because that's what family does. But this... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Mara found herself studying him in the morning light. Really studying him. Damien Moretti was a killer. Everyone knew that. He ran an empire built on violence and intimidation and money laundered through legitimate businesses. But standing there with his shoulders tight and exhaustion carved into every line of his face, he looked more like a man carrying a weight he couldn't put down. Why do you care? The question came out before Mara could stop it. You don't know me. I'm just some random nurse your brother decided to destroy. Why does it matter to you? Damien looked at her with those cold, lethal eyes. Because I've spent my entire life trying to keep my family from becoming the monsters my father wanted us to be. And I failed. Luca became exactly what I was trying to prevent, so yeah, it matters. Because every person he hurts is proof that I failed. The honesty was brutal, raw. Mara wasn't expecting it. That's not your fault, she said quietly. Isn't it? Damien's laugh was bitter. I knew what he was. I saw the signs, the cruelty, the entitlement, but I told myself it was just youth, that he'd grow out of it. I enabled him by cleaning up his messes and making excuses. So yeah, this is absolutely my fault. You didn't chain me in that basement. I might as well have. Mara didn't know what to say to that. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them could fix. Finally, Damien straightened and the vulnerability disappeared behind that cold mask again. Nicholas will show you around the estate. You're free to go anywhere on the property, but don't try to leave. The security here is designed to keep people out, but it works just as well for keeping people in. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected. There's a difference. Is there? Damien didn't answer, just walked away, leaving Mara alone in a foyer that probably cost more than her entire life savings. Nicholas appeared moments later. The massive enforcer from the basement, still built like a tank, but his expression was softer in daylight, almost friendly. Miss Ellison, boss said you wanted a tour. I want to leave. Can't do that, but I can show you where everything is so you don't feel like a prisoner. He smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost gentle. Come on. Place is big enough to get lost in if you don't know the layout. Mara followed because she didn't have any other options. The estate was massive, 20 bedrooms, a gym that looked like it belonged in a professional training facility, a library with more books than Mara had ever seen in one place, an indoor pool, a kitchen staffed by actual chefs, and everywhere men in suits with guns watching everything. How many people live here? Mara asked as Nicholas led her through a hallway lined with artwork. Depends. Boss keeps a rotation of about 20 security staff on site at all times. More if there's a situation. Like now. Like now. Nicholas stopped at a set of double doors. This is the East Wing. Your room, a few guest suites, and a medical suite we set up last night. Dr. Reeves will be checking on you daily until you're cleared. And if I'm not cleared, then you stay longer, boss's orders. Mara wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her body was still too weak and there was nowhere to run to anyway. Luca was out there somewhere, and until he was dealt with, this mansion was the safest cage she could be trapped in. Can I make a phone call? She asked quietly. Nicholas's expression turned sympathetic. Not yet. I'm sorry. What if I just walk out? Then I stop you. And I really don't want to do that, Miss Ellison, so please don't make me. The honesty was almost refreshing. At least he wasn't pretending she had choices. They continued the tour. Nicholas showed her the gardens, sprawling and dead from winter, and the garage filled with vehicles that probably cost more collectively than a small house. He was patient, answering her questions without judgment, treating her like a person instead of a problem. By the time they returned to her room, Mara was exhausted again. 3 months of malnutrition didn't heal overnight. "Get some rest," Nicholas said. "Dinner's at 7 if you want to join us. Otherwise, someone will bring food up." "Who's us?" "Inner circle, boss, me, Sophia, Marcus, and a few others. We eat together when there's not a situation." "And now there's a situation." "Now there's a situation," Nicholas confirmed. "But you're still welcome. Might be good for you to see we're not all monsters." He left before Mara could respond to that. She spent the afternoon lying in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. Her family thought she was dead, her life was gone. And she was trapped in a mobster's mansion waiting for him to murder his own brother so she could, what, go back to a life that didn't exist anymore? Evening came with Sophia knocking on her door. "Dinner's ready if you want to join." Mara didn't want to. Wanted to stay in this room and pretend none of this was real. But staying alone meant drowning in thoughts that would tear her apart. Fine. The dining room was smaller than she expected, intimate almost, with a table that could seat 12 but currently only held 6 people. Damien sat at the head, dressed in a fresh suit looking every inch the crime lord he was. Nicholas sat to his right, Sophia to his left. 3 other men Mara didn't recognize filled the remaining seats. They all stood when she entered. "Miss Ellison," Damien said, "please sit." Mara took the empty chair beside Sophia. A chef appeared immediately with plates of food that smelled incredible. Roasted chicken, vegetables, bread that was actually warm. Her stomach growled despite her anxiety. "Eat," Damien said. It wasn't a request. Mara picked up her fork. The first bite was heaven. The second made her eyes water. Real food, prepared with care. The opposite of stale bread dropped on concrete. "Any updates?" Sophia asked Damien. 3 confirmed sightings in the past 12 hours, all dead ends by the time we got there. He's moving fast. "He's running scared," one of the other men said. Marcus, based on the name tag of authority in his voice. "Using every safe house he knows." "Then we burn them all," Damien said flatly. "Every property, every connection, every person who's helped him. I want him isolated." "What about the family?" Nicholas asked carefully. Damien's expression went dark. "What about them?" "They're asking questions. Your uncle specifically wants to know what happened at the house." "Tell him I'm handling internal business." "He wants a meeting." "Then he can keep wanting." Damien's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Luca's actions don't represent this family. They represent one individual who betrayed everything we stand for. And I will deal with him personally before anyone else gets involved." The temperature in the room dropped. Everyone went very still, including Mara. She was watching something she wasn't supposed to see. The internal power dynamics of an organization built on violence. "Understood," Marcus said quietly. Dinner continued in tense silence. Mara ate slowly, watching the people around her. They moved like soldiers, efficient, disciplined. But there was loyalty there too. These people would die for Damien without question. What did it take to inspire that kind of devotion in killers? After dinner, Damien walked Mara back to her room himself. She didn't ask why he bothered, just walked beside him through hallways that felt less like a maze now. "You're adjusting," he said. "I'm surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" Mara stopped at her door. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Damien considered the question for a long moment. "Because you deserve better than what my brother did to you. And because I need to prove to myself that not everyone in my family is a monster." "By becoming one yourself?" "I've always been one. I'm just being honest about it now." He turned to leave, and Mara found herself calling after him again. "Damien," he paused. "What happens after? When Luca's dealt with and I'm free to go, what happens to me? Whatever you want. New identity if you need it. Money to start over. Protection until you're settled. Or nothing at all if you prefer. And you?" "I keep running an empire built on blood." He looked back at her, and for a moment the mask slipped. "Some of us don't get to walk away from what we are." Then he was gone, and Mara was alone again with thoughts that wouldn't quiet. Days passed. Mara fell into a routine because routines were the only thing keeping her sane. Wake up, shower, eat breakfast with Sophia, walk the grounds with Nicholas. Avoid Damien when possible because being around him made her feel things she didn't want to examine. Dr. Reeves monitored her recovery with clinical precision. Weight slowly returning, wounds healing, strength building. But the nightmares didn't stop. Every night she woke up screaming, convinced she was back in the basement. Every night the same panic, the same terror. On the 5th day, Mara found an unused room on the 2nd floor. Windows overlooking the lake, hardwood floors, empty except for dust. "What is this room?" she asked Sophia. "Storage." Why? An idea formed. Desperate and maybe insane, but something to focus on besides the cage she was trapped in. "Can I use it?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "Medical supplies, basic equipment, a clinic." "Miss Ellison, you have Dr. Reeves." "Not for me, for them." Mara gestured vaguely toward the rest of the estate. "Your security staff. The people who get hurt doing whatever it is you all do. They need medical care, and they can't go to hospitals any more than I can right now, so let me help." Sophia studied her for a long moment. "You want to patch up criminals. I want to be useful instead of sitting in my room going insane. I'll ask the boss." Damien approved it within an hour. "Whatever you need," he told Mara that evening. "Equipment, supplies, budget. Nicholas will help you set it up." "Why?" "Because you're right. My men get hurt and can't seek proper medical care. Having a qualified trauma nurse on site is valuable." He paused. "And because you need something to keep you from drowning in your own head. I recognize the signs. You sound like you know from experience." "I do." That was all he said. But it was enough. Mara threw herself into building the clinic. Nicholas helped move furniture. Sophia sourced medical supplies through connections that probably weren't legal. Within 3 days, the empty room had transformed into a functional field hospital. The first patient arrived on day 6. One of Damien's men, Marco, took a knife wound in a fight that Mara didn't ask questions about. Nicholas carried him into her clinic, bleeding through makeshift bandages. Mara's training kicked in immediately. "Put him on the table. How long ago?" 20 minutes. She cut away the blood-soaked shirt. Deep laceration across the ribs, muscle damage, but nothing vital hit. Lucky. She prepped antiseptic, threaded sutures, and got to work. Marco gritted his teeth through the stitches. "You're good at this." ER nurse for 5 years. Mara tied off the last suture. "You're lucky it missed anything important. Keep it clean, change the dressing twice a day, and don't do anything stupid for at least a week." "What counts as stupid?" "Biting, heavy lifting, anything that's going to rip these open. You tear these stitches, and I'll make the next set hurt." Marco laughed despite the pain. "Yes, ma'am." Word spread fast. By the end of the week, Mara had treated 6 more men for various injuries. Bullet grazed, dislocated shoulder, broken fingers. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to keep her busy. They treated her with cautious respect, called her doc even though she wasn't a doctor, followed her instructions without argument. And slowly, grudgingly, Mara started seeing them as people instead of monsters. Nicholas had a scar across his shoulder from a knife fight when he was 19. Sophia had been a combat medic before joining Damien's organization. Marco sent money to his mother in Italy every month. They were killers, criminals, but they were also human. It made everything more complicated. On day 9, Damien came to inspect the clinic. Mara was restocking supplies when he walked in, moving with that lethal grace that made her pulse jump for reasons she didn't want to examine. "Nicholas says you've been busy. Your men keep getting hurt. It's an occupational hazard." He studied the room, the organized shelves, the clean equipment, the professionalism. "You've done good work here." "It's what I do." Mara set down the box of gauze. "Any updates on Luca?" Damien's expression hardened. "We're close. He made a mistake yesterday, tried to access money from an account I'd frozen. We tracked the location, but he was gone before we arrived." So still nothing. "Not nothing. Progress. He's running out of resources. It's only a matter of time." "And then?" "Then you're free." The word should have brought relief. Instead, Mara felt something twist in her chest, strange and uncomfortable. She'd been here almost 2 weeks, had built a routine, had started feeling almost safe. Almost. What's wrong? Damien asked. Nothing. You're lying. Mara laughed bitterly. I'm trapped in a mob boss's mansion because your brother kidnapped me. Everything's wrong, but I'm also treating gunshot wounds and patching up criminals like it's normal. So yeah, maybe I'm going crazy. You're not crazy. You're adapting. It's survival. Is that what you tell yourself? Damien moved closer, close enough that Mara could smell his cologne. Every day. Because if I didn't adapt, I'd have eaten a bullet years ago. The honesty was brutal, raw, and it made Mara see him differently, not as the cold crime lord or the man who'd rescued her, but as someone who'd been born into darkness and never found a way out. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what? That you didn't get a choice either. Something flickered in Damien's expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. He opened his mouth to respond. His phone rang. He answered immediately. Talk. His face went very still. When? A pause. Secure the perimeter. I'm on my way. He ended the call and looked at Mara with eyes gone flat and deadly. What happened? She asked. Luca just made contact. He wants to meet. Mara's blood went cold. Where? Neutral territory, public place. He says he wants to talk. It's a trap. Probably. Damien's smile was sharp. But it's also an opportunity. If I can get him in one place, I can end this. And if he kills you first, then Nicholas will finish the job, and you'll still be protected. He moved toward the door, then paused. Stay here. Don't leave the estate, no matter what you hear. Damien, he looked back at her. Be careful. Careful doesn't win wars, but I'll try not to die. Then he was gone, and Mara was left standing in her clinic surrounded by blood-stained gauze and the terrible certainty that everything was about to go very wrong. She spent the next 3 hours pacing her room, trying not to imagine all the ways Damien could die. Nicholas had taken most of the security staff with him, leaving the estate eerily quiet. Sophia checked on her twice, both times with forced calm that didn't reach her eyes. Something was wrong. Mara felt it in her bones. At midnight, gunfire erupted. Not outside. Inside the estate. Close enough to shake the windows. Mara grabbed the medical bag she'd packed out of habit and ran into the hallway. Sophia was already there, gun drawn, shouting orders into her radio. What's happening? Mara demanded. Breach, south entrance. Get back in your room and lock the door. How many? I don't know. Just... An explosion ripped through the floor below them. The entire building shook. Mara grabbed the wall to keep from falling. More gunfire, screaming, the sounds of a battle happening beneath her feet. Sophia grabbed Mara's arm. Move. Now. They ran through hallways that had become a war zone. Sophia moved like a soldier, weapon up, checking corners. Mara followed on her heels, heart hammering. They turned a corner and came face to face with 3 men in black tactical gear. Not Damien's men, Luca's. Sophia fired twice. Both men dropped. The third raised his weapon. Mara threw her medical bag. It hit him in the face. Sophia put 2 rounds in his chest before he recovered. Run! Sophia shouted. They ran. More tactical teams were flooding the building. Damien had taken most of his security to meet Luca, leaving the estate vulnerable. It wasn't a trap for Damien. It was a trap for Mara. Sophia dragged her into a panic room hidden behind a bookcase in the library. Steel walls, monitors showing security feeds, communication equipment. Stay here, Sophia ordered. Don't open this door for anyone except me, Nicholas, or the boss. Where are you going? To kill every bastard who walked into this house. Sophia disappeared before Mara could argue. Mara stood alone in the panic room, watching monitors show her estate turning into a battlefield. Damien's remaining security fought hard, but they were outnumbered. Bodies fell on both sides. Then one of the monitors showed the front entrance. A man walked through the shattered doors like he owned the place. Young, handsome, brown hair. Luca Moretti. Mara's hand started shaking. She knew that face, had stared at it in the dark while begging for mercy that never came. He moved through the foyer with calm confidence, stepping over bodies, surveying the damage like he was inspecting property he'd just purchased. He looked directly at a security camera and smiled. Mara realized with sick certainty what this was. Luca hadn't wanted to meet Damien. He'd wanted to lure him away. so he could come for her. Mara's breath came in short, sharp gasps as she watched Luca move through the foyer on the security monitor. He paused to examine one of his own dead mercenaries, nudging the body with his boot like he was checking produce at a grocery store. No emotion, no concern, just cold calculation. He was hunting her, and he knew exactly where she was. Mara's hands trembled as she reached for the communication panel Sophia had pointed to before running back into the fight. Her fingers hovered over the emergency call button that would connect directly to Damien's phone. But what could he do? He was across the city, walking into whatever ambush Luca had set for him. By the time he got back here, this would be over. One way or another. On the monitor, Luca pulled out his phone, typed something, put it back in his pocket and smiled at the camera again. Mara's phone buzzed. She'd left it on the small table near the panic room door. Sophia had given it to her days ago, a burner phone with only 3 numbers programmed in. Damien, Nicholas, Sophia. Nobody else. No way for anyone outside the estate to reach her, except the phone was buzzing. Unknown number. Mara stared at it like it was a live grenade. Her training screamed at her not to answer. Don't engage, don't give him anything. But her hand reached for it anyway because some sick part of her needed to hear his voice, needed to confirm that the monster from her nightmares was real and standing 50 feet away from her hiding place. She answered. "Hello, Mara." Luca's voice was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, young, friendly almost, like they were old acquaintances catching up after a long absence. "It's been too long." Mara couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. "I know you can hear me. I can see your heart rate spiking on the medical monitor Nicholas so thoughtfully set up in your room. Did you know these panic rooms have external feeds? Damien's security is excellent, but it's designed to keep people out, not to keep secrets in." He'd been watching her this entire time. Every moment she thought she was safe, he'd been watching. "What do you want?" Mara forced the words out. "The same thing I've always wanted. You." "I'm not a thing you can want." Luca laughed. The sound made Mara's skin crawl. "That's what I loved about you from the beginning. That fire. Most people break within the first week, but you? 3 months and you still fought, still screamed, still hoped someone would save you. It was beautiful." "You're insane." "I'm honest. There's a difference." His voice hardened slightly. "My brother thinks he can fix everything with guns and money and righteous fury, but he doesn't understand what I learned watching you in that basement. People aren't puzzles you solve, they're games you play, and I'm very good at games." On the monitor, Luca started walking toward the library, toward her. "Stay away from me." "Or what? You'll hide in Damien's expensive box while my men tear this building apart? I have 16 operators in this estate right now, Mara. Your security killed 4. That leaves 12 hunting through rooms searching for you. And once they find that panic room door, they'll cut through it with thermite charges that'll turn it into an oven." Mara's eyes darted to the steel door. Solid, secure, but not invincible. Nothing was invincible. "Damien will kill you," she said. "Damien is currently surrounded by a dozen of Chicago's finest police officers at a warehouse on the south side. Anonymous tip about a mob meeting. He'll be tied up in interrogations for hours. By the time he's free, I'll be gone. And so will you." The trap wasn't just for Damien. It was for everyone. "I'll scream," Mara said. "I'll fight. I'll make it impossible for you to move me. I'm counting on it." Luca's voice dropped to something intimate, obscene. "That's the whole point. Breaking you was too easy the first time. You were exhausted from work, caught off guard. This time you know what's coming. You've had weeks to recover. You've remembered what it feels like to be strong, and I'm going to take all of that away again, slowly." Mara ended the call and threw the phone across the panic room. It hit the wall and shattered. Think. She needed to think like a nurse, like someone who'd spent 5 years in emergency rooms making life or death decisions in seconds. Assess the situation, identify resources, execute a plan. Situation. Trapped in a panic room with limited time before Luca's men breached it. Resources, medical bag, communication panel, security monitors, and her own knowledge of the estate layout from 2 weeks of walking the grounds with Nicholas. Plan, get out before they found her. Mara pulled up the security feeds and studied them with clinical precision. Luca was 3 hallways away, moving slowly, checking rooms. His mercenaries were spread throughout the building, working in pairs. Damien's remaining security was falling back to defensive positions, outnumbered and outgunned. But one monitor showed something useful. The service corridor that ran behind the kitchen. Empty. It connected to the garage through a door that most people didn't know existed because it was hidden behind a false panel. If Mara could reach that corridor, she could get to the garage. And if she could get to the garage, she could take one of Damien's vehicles and run. Just run until she hit a police station or a hospital or anywhere with witnesses and cameras and safety. It was insane. But staying here was death. Mara grabbed her medical bag and moved to the panic room controls. Sophia had shown her the emergency override, a manual release that would open the door even during lockdown. She hesitated with her hand on the lever. Opening this door meant leaving the only secure space in the building, meant putting herself back in play. But staying meant waiting to be burned alive or dragged out by men who'd been paid to deliver her to a monster. She pulled the lever. The steel door slid open with a hydraulic hiss that sounded deafening in the silence. Mara stepped into the library, pulse hammering in her ears. Gunfire echoed from somewhere upstairs, shouting, a door being kicked in. She ran, through the library, down a hallway lined with expensive artwork that had probably been looted from someone's estate. Past Damien's office with its massive desk and the smell of leather and expensive Sigma. Her feet made almost no sound on the hardwood floors. Nurses learned to move quietly in hospitals at night, and the skill transferred. The service corridor door was exactly where Nicholas had shown her, hidden behind a panel that looked like part of the wall but pushed inward when you knew where to press. Mara slipped inside and let it close behind her. Darkness swallowed her immediately. No, not again. She couldn't do darkness again. Mara fumbled in her medical bag and found a penlight. The thin beam cut through the black like a knife. The corridor was narrow, concrete walls pressing in from both sides, pipes running along the ceiling. Utilitarian. Built for staff to move unseen. She could hear her own breathing. Too loud. Too fast. Hyperventilating. Control it. Slow down. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like she'd tell a patient in shock. The corridor stretched ahead into more darkness. Mara forced herself to move forward, penlight sweeping back and forth. 20 feet. 30. The kitchen door should be right ahead. A hand grabbed her from behind. Mara screamed and spun, swinging the medical bag like a weapon. It connected with someone's face and they grunted. She raised the penlight and saw Sophia's face, blood streaming from her nose. "Jesus Christ, Doc," Sophia hissed. "It's me. You grabbed me. I was trying to stop you from walking into an ambush." Sophia pressed a hand to her nose, checking the damage. Probably broken. "What the hell are you doing out of the panic room?" "Luca's men were going to breach it. I needed to move." Sophia cursed in what sounded like Italian. "Where's your phone?" "Destroyed." "Luca called it." "How?" "I don't know. He said he'd been watching the monitors, said he knew where I was." Sophia's expression went dark. "Someone on the inside gave him access to our security system, which means we have a traitor." She grabbed Mara's arm. "Come on, we need to get you out of here before—" An explosion ripped through the wall beside them. Not a breach charge. A grenade. The concussive force threw both women backward. Mara's head cracked against concrete, and stars burst across her vision. Her ears rang. She couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Sophia was on her feet first, weapon up, firing into the smoke and dust. Mara saw muzzle flashes, saw Sophia's body jerk as bullets hit her vest. Then Sophia went down hard. Mara crawled toward her, medical training overriding survival instinct. Sophia was alive. Mara could see her chest rising and falling, but she wasn't moving. Concussion, maybe. Or worse. Figures moved through the smoke. 2 men in tactical gear, weapons raised. Mara did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed Sophia's fallen gun. She'd never fired a weapon in her life. But she'd watched enough police officers come through the ER with shooting victims to understand the basics. Point, squeeze, don't pull. She pointed at the nearest figure and squeezed. The recoil nearly broke her wrist. The shot went wide, punching a hole in the concrete wall. But it made both men dive for cover, and that gave Mara 3 seconds. She used them, grabbed Sophia by the vest and dragged her backward through the service corridor, away from the breach. Sophia weighed at least 140, all muscle, and Mara's malnourished body screamed in protest. But adrenaline made her strong. made her drag Sophia around a corner just as more gunfire chewed up the space where they'd been standing. Mara set Sophia down as gently as she could and checked her pupils. Reactive. Good. Concussion, but probably not critical. Sophia's eyes fluttered open. Doc? Stay still. You took a hit to the head. Luca? Coming. Can you walk? Sophia tried to sit up and immediately vomited. Definite concussion. She wasn't walking anywhere. Mara made a decision. She stripped the tactical vest off Sophia's body and put it on herself. Too big, hanging loose, but better than nothing. Found a spare magazine in Sophia's pocket and somehow managed to reload the pistol without dropping it. Checked Sophia's pulse one more time. I'll come back for you, Mara promised. I swear. Sophia grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Don't let him take you again. I won't. Mara ran. The service corridor branched ahead, left toward the kitchen, right toward the garage. She went right, following the layout Nicholas had shown her, trying to remember every turn. Behind her, boots pounded on concrete. The mercenaries had found Sophia. Would they kill her or leave her? Mara didn't know, couldn't think about it, could only run. The garage door appeared ahead like salvation. Mara hit it at full speed, shoulder first, and it slammed open. Rows of expensive vehicles stretched before her. SUVs, sports cars. A fucking Bentley. Keys. Where did they keep keys? A lockbox on the wall. Mara smashed the glass with the pistol grip and grabbed the first set she touched. Mercedes logo. Good enough. She ran through the rows, hitting the unlock button until lights flashed on a black SUV near the exit, climbed in, jammed the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. Mara threw it in gear and stomped the accelerator. The SUV leaped forward, tires screaming. The garage door was closed. She aimed straight for it and prayed the vehicle was heavy enough. It was. The SUV smashed through the garage door like it was made of paper. Metal shrieked, glass shattered. Mara held the wheel steady and kept accelerating. The estate driveway stretched ahead, iron gates at the end, also closed. But these gates were designed to stop people from getting in, not out. She could see the emergency release mechanism from here, a pressure plate that would trigger the gates to open for emergency vehicles. She aimed for it. The SUV hit the plate doing 60. The gates started to open. Not fast enough. The passenger side clipped the left gate and the mirror exploded in a shower of glass and plastic. Then she was through, fishtailing onto the private road that led away from the estate. Mara drove like she'd never driven in her life. Foot flat on the accelerator, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Trees blurred past on both sides. She didn't slow down until the private road connected with the main highway, and she could see other cars, normal people, living normal lives, not knowing a woman was running for her life 50 feet away. She merged into traffic, forced herself to slow down to something approaching legal, checked the rear-view mirror every 3 seconds for pursuit. Nothing yet. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the wheel. Reaction setting in, adrenaline crash. She'd just shot at people, stolen a car, abandoned Sophia and the others. She'd survived. Mara pulled into a gas station 2 miles down the highway, parked behind the building where the SUV wouldn't be visible from the road. Cut the engine and sat there shaking. Her phone was destroyed. She had no money, no ID. She was wearing a tactical vest over clothes that probably cost $1,000 and carrying a loaded weapon she barely knew how to use. But she was free. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Free. After 3 months in a basement and 2 weeks trapped in a gilded cage, she was actually free. She could walk into that gas station and call the police right now. Tell them everything. About Luca. About Damien. About the bodies at the estate and the war happening in Chicago's criminal underworld. She could end this. Mara reached for the door handle. Her phone, no, not her phone. It was destroyed. A phone. She needed a phone. She climbed out of the SUV on legs that felt like water and stumbled toward the gas station entrance. A bell chimed when she opened the door. The clerk behind the counter looked up, teenager, maybe 17, and his eyes went wide when he saw her. Mara realized what she must look like. Blood on her clothes, tactical vest, wild eyes, hair matted with dust and sweat. "I need to use your phone," she said. The kid raised his hand slowly. "Lady, I don't want any trouble. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need a phone. There's a payphone outside." "I don't have money." The kid hesitated, then slowly pulled his cell phone from his pocket and slid it across the counter. "Just Please don't shoot me. Mara looked down and realized she was still holding Sophia's pistol. She'd forgotten she was carrying it. She set it on the counter carefully and picked up the phone. Who did she call? Police would mean questions, interrogations, media attention, and Luca would know immediately where to find her. He had connections, money, could probably walk into a police station and find out exactly which room she was being held in. She could call Damien. His number was burned into her memory from 2 weeks of seeing it on the burner phone. But Damien was dealing with his own trap right now, and calling him meant staying in his world, becoming more tangled in the darkness that had already consumed too much of her life. Mara's finger hovered over the numbers. The gas station door chimed again. She looked up. Luca walked in. Not running, not urgent, just walking, like he'd known exactly where she would end up. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket, and that same friendly smile that made Mara want to vomit. That was impressive, he said conversationally. The garage door, very action movie. My men lost you for almost 3 minutes. The teenager behind the counter was frozen. Mara grabbed Sophia's pistol and pointed it at Luca with both hands, trying to remember everything she'd seen in movies. Steady grip, finger on the trigger, don't shake. Stay back. Luca raised his hands in mock surrender. Relax. I'm not here to drag you back to a basement. That was old me. Impulsive, sloppy. You killed people tonight. Mercenaries killed people. I just pointed them in the right direction. He took a step closer. You need to understand something, Mara. I didn't take you because I'm some psychopath who gets off on torturing women. I took you because I needed to prove something to myself. That you're a monster? That I'm not my brother. Another step. Damien thinks he's better than the rest of us. Thinks his discipline and control make him evolved, but he's just as much a monster as I am. He's just better at hiding it. So I decided to show him what real monstrosity looks like. By kidnapping an innocent person. By taking something he would care about if he knew it existed. I watched you for weeks, Mara. Saw how you worked double shifts to help people. Saw your kindness, your strength. And I knew that if Damien ever found you, he'd see the same things. He'd want to protect you, save you, play hero. Mara's hands were shaking. The gun felt like it weighed 100 pounds. So you kept me chained in a basement for 3 months just to hurt your brother? I kept you chained in a basement to become someone important enough for him to notice. Luca's smile widened. And it worked. He burned half his empire looking for me. Alienated family, made enemies, all for you. A woman he didn't even know until 2 weeks ago. That's how I win. Not by being stronger, by being smarter. You're insane. I'm honest. He took another step. And here's more honesty. You're not going to shoot me. You're a nurse. You save lives. Killing goes against everything you are. You don't know what I am anymore. Don't I? Luca gestured at the gun. You're shaking so badly you'd probably miss from 6 feet, and even if you hit me, even if you killed me right here, what then? You become a murderer. Damien's brother's killer. Do you think his organization will just let that go? You'll spend the rest of your life running from people much scarier than me. He was 3 feet away now. Last chance, Mara. Come with me voluntarily. No chains this time, no basement, just you and me figuring out what we are to each other. I know what you are. You're a monster who destroyed my life. And yet you're still not pulling that trigger. Mara's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed at her to fire, to end this. But Luca was right. She was a nurse. She'd spent 5 years saving lives, not taking them. The hesitation cost her everything. Luca moved faster than should have been possible. Grabbed the gun, twisted it from her grip, and had her turned around with her own weapon pressed against her temple before she could even scream. The teenager behind the counter whimpered. Smart kid, Luca said. Forget you saw anything here. I'd hate to have to come back. He dragged Mara toward the door. She fought, but 3 months of starvation had stolen her strength, and 2 weeks of recovery hadn't been enough to get it back. He was stronger, faster, and he'd done this before. Outside, a van was waiting, side door open, 2 of his mercenaries standing guard. No, Mara screamed. Please, no! Luca pushed her toward the van. Headlights flooded the parking lot. A black SUV, different from the one Mara had stolen, came screaming into the gas station doing at least 70. It didn't slow down, just aimed straight for Luca's van and hit it like a battering ram. Metal crunched. Glass exploded. Both mercenaries went flying. The SUV's doors opened and Nicholas stepped out, blood running down the side of his face, carrying 2 pistols. He didn't say anything, just started shooting. Luca threw Mara to the ground and returned fire with her stolen weapon. Bullets punched through the gas station windows. The teenager screamed. Nicholas took cover behind his SUV and kept firing with mechanical precision. Mara crawled behind a concrete planter, trying to make herself invisible. More vehicles arrived. Damien's men, moving like a coordinated unit, surrounding the gas station. Luca's remaining mercenaries returned fire, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Then Damien himself stepped out of the lead vehicle. He looked like death in an expensive suit, blood on his knuckles, jacket torn, eyes absolutely empty. He saw Luca, and everything else ceased to exist. "Hello, brother," Luca called out, still holding Sophia's gun. "Took you long enough. Let her go." "Or what? You'll kill me? We both know you won't. Not your own blood. I've killed for less." Damien's voice was flat, dead. "And you stopped being my blood the moment you put chains on her. She's mine. She's not a thing you can own. Neither is your empire, but you act like it is." Luca laughed, and the sound was unhinged, broken. "You never understood. Father left me nothing. The business, the respect, the power. All went to the responsible son, the disciplined one. I was just an afterthought, something to be managed. You were family. I was a liability you cleaned up after." Luca's grip tightened on the gun. "So I decided to become something you couldn't ignore, something that would make you remember I exist. By destroying innocent people. By showing you what happens when you forget someone." Luca pressed the gun to his own temple. "You want me to let her go? Fine. But I'm not going to prison. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being your failure." Damien went very still. "Luca, don't." "Why not? You were going to kill me anyway. This way, I control the narrative." "You're sick. We can get you help." "I don't want help," Luca screamed. "I wanted to matter. And the only way I could matter was by becoming your nightmare." Mara watched from behind the planter as Luca's finger tightened on the trigger. She moved without thinking, launched herself forward, grabbed his arm, pulled the gun away from his head. The weapon fired, but not into Luca's skull, into Mara's shoulder. Pain exploded through her body, hot, all-consuming. She fell backward, blood spreading across her borrowed clothes. Luca stared at her in shock. Damien roared and charged forward. What happened next felt like watching a movie. Damien hit Luca like a freight train, driving him to the ground. Fists connected with flesh, bone crunched. Nicholas and the others swarmed in, pulling Damien off before he beat his brother to death on a gas station parking lot. Mara lay on cold concrete, staring at stars, wondering distantly if she was going to die. Damien's face appeared above her. "Stay with me," he ordered. "Mara, look at me. Stay with me." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "I couldn't shoot him. I should have shot him." "You saved his life." "I'm a nurse. It's what I do." Damien pressed his hands over her wound, applying pressure. Blood seeped between his fingers. "You're an idiot." "Probably." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. Damien's men were already moving, erasing evidence, disappearing into the night. "I need to go," Damien said. His face was anguished. "The police can't find me here." "I know." "Nicholas will stay. He'll make sure you're taken care of." "What about Luca?" Damien looked at where his brother was being restrained by 3 men. Broken, bloody, finally captured. "He'll be dealt with." "Don't kill him." "Why the hell not?" "Because then you become him." Mara's vision was starting to blur, blood loss. "And you're better than that." Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then he leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers. "You're the only person who's ever believed that. Don't prove me wrong." He left, disappeared into the night with his men, taking Luca with them. Nicholas stayed behind, holding pressure on Mara's wound, talking to her in a low, steady voice until the ambulance arrived. The paramedics descended with practiced efficiency. Mara let them work, finally allowing herself to float away from the pain. An ER nurse knew what a gunshot wound looked like, knew the survival odds. She'd live. But everything had changed, because now the whole world would know she existed. The police would ask questions, media would dig. And Luca's final revenge was that he dragged her into the light where she could never hide again. As the ambulance doors closed and sirens wailed, Mara wondered if Damien had been right all along. Maybe there was no such thing as freedom, after all, only different kinds of cages. The hospital was chaos. Mara woke to bright lights and the antiseptic smell that meant sterile environments and life-saving equipment. Her shoulder screamed, not the dull throb of managed pain, but the sharp, vicious reminder that a bullet had torn through muscle and bone 3 hours ago. A nurse she didn't recognize checked her IV, young, efficient, probably fresh out of school. Mara wanted to tell her the drip rate was too fast, but her mouth felt full of cotton. "You're awake." The nurse smiled with practiced kindness. "How's your pain level?" "Where am I?" "Northwestern Memorial. You were brought in with a GSW to the left shoulder. Clean through, no arterial damage. You got lucky." Lucky. Mara almost laughed. Nothing about the past 3 months qualified as lucky. "There are police officers outside who want to speak with you," the nurse continued, "but the doctor said you need rest first. I can tell them to come back." "No!" Mara's voice came out rough. "Send them in." The nurse hesitated, then nodded and disappeared. 2 detectives entered 5 minutes later. One was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. The other was younger, female, dressed in a pantsuit that screamed ambition. They both wore expressions that said they'd already decided Mara was either a victim or a criminal, possibly both. "Miss Ellison?" The older detective pulled up a chair. "I'm Detective Morrison. This is Detective Chen. We need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight." "I was kidnapped 3 months ago," Mara said before he could continue. "Held in a basement. The man who took me came back to finish what he started. I got shot trying to stop him from killing himself." Both detectives went very still. Morrison pulled out a notebook. "Start from the beginning." Mara told them everything. The parking garage, the basement, Damien finding her, the attack on the estate, Luca at the gas station. She left out nothing except the parts that would directly implicate Damien in crimes he hadn't committed in front of her. The kidnapping was Luca's. The rescue was Damien's. Everything else was self-defense and survival. By the time she finished, both detectives looked like they'd been hit by trucks. "Luca Moretti," Chen said slowly. "You're saying Luca Moretti kidnapped and imprisoned you for 3 months?" "Yes." "And his brother Damien rescued you?" "Yes." "And tonight Luca attacked Damien's estate trying to recapture you?" "Yes." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Miss Ellison, do you understand what you're telling us? The Moretti family has been under federal investigation for organized crime for 15 years. If what you're saying is true, it's true. Then you're the most important witness in a case that could bring down one of Chicago's largest criminal organizations." The words landed like stones. Witness. She was a witness now, not just a survivor, a key piece in a legal machine that would grind through both Moretti brothers without mercy. "Where's Luca now?" Mara asked. The detectives exchanged glances. "We don't know," Chen admitted. "By the time units arrived at the gas station, he was gone. So was Damien Moretti and most of his associates. We have the scene. Witnesses, shell casings, but no suspects in custody. They took him." "Who took who?" "Damien's men took Luca. He's not hiding. He's being held somewhere." Morrison's jaw tightened. "If you know where—" "I don't, but I know Damien won't kill him, not after what I said." "And what did you say?" "That killing Luca would make him no better than his brother, and that he was better than that." Chen made a note. "You sound protective of a known crime boss." "I sound grateful to the man who cut chains off my wrists and gave me a place to heal. Whatever Damien is, he's not the monster who kept me in a basement. He's still a criminal. So arrest him, but do it for crimes he actually committed, not because his brother is a psychopath." Morrison stood. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow for a formal statement, full deposition, everything you remember. And Miss Ellison?" He paused at the door. "You should know the media already has this story. By tomorrow morning, your name and face will be everywhere. Disappeared nurse resurfaces after 3 months. Kidnapped by mob boss's brother. It's going to be a circus." They left. Mara lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process the weight of what Morrison had said. Media. her face everywhere. No more anonymity, no more chance to disappear and start over. Luca's final revenge was complete. He dragged her into the light where she'd be dissected by reporters and true crime podcasts and armchair detectives who'd analyze every decision she'd made. Some would call her brave. Others would question why she hadn't fought harder, why she'd trusted Damien, why she'd saved Luca from himself. Her phone buzzed, not the destroyed burner. A new phone sitting on the bedside table. Someone had left it while she was unconscious. She picked it up and found one text message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." Mara stared at those two words. Sorry for what? For his brother? For the media storm? For caring about someone he shouldn't have cared about? She typed back, "Where is he?" The response came immediately. "Somewhere he can't hurt anyone else, including himself. The police are looking for both of you." "I know. Let them look." "Damien, you can't just disappear. This is too big now. Watch me." Mara wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, she typed, "What happens next? You heal, you testify if you want to, you get your life back. And you? I do what I've always done, survive." The conversation ended. Mara set the phone down and closed her eyes, exhaustion dragging her under despite the pain. She dreamed about basements and chains and a man's voice asking her questions she couldn't answer. She woke to sunlight and Nicholas sitting in the chair beside her bed. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him. Bruises covered his face. His left arm was in a sling, but he smiled when he saw her eyes open. "Morning, Doc. You're supposed to be hiding from police." "Probably, but someone needed to check on you." He held up a bag. "Brought breakfast. Hospital food is shit." "Nicholas, Sophia's alive," he said before she could ask. "Concussion and 3 cracked ribs, but she's too stubborn to die. Most of the guys made it out. We lost 2. The weight of those words settled over the room. 2 dead. Because Luca had wanted to prove something to his brother. Because Mara had existed in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. They knew the risks." Nicholas pulled out a bagel and coffee. "Boss wanted me to give you something." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $200,000 and a single piece of paper with an address written in bold handwriting. Below the address, safe house, fully stocked. Yours if you want it. No strings. D. "He's trying to buy me off," Mara said quietly. "He's trying to give you options." Nicholas leaned forward. "Look, I know what you're thinking. Rich criminal throws money at problems. But that's not what this is. Boss spent 15 years cleaning up after Luca, paying off victims, making problems disappear. He's drowning in guilt over what his brother did to you. This is him trying to make something right in the only way he knows how. Money doesn't fix 3 months in a basement. No. But it buys you time to figure out what comes next. New identity, security, medical care, whatever you need." Mara stared at the check. $200,000. More money than she'd make in 5 years of nursing. Enough to disappear completely if she wanted to. "Where's Luca?" she asked. Nicholas's expression went flat. "You don't want to know." "Yes, I do. He's being held at one of our secure locations. Under guard. Boss is trying to figure out what to do with him." "What are the options?" "Turn him over to the feds. Let him face justice through the system. Or..." Nicholas didn't finish the sentence. "Or kill him. Or let nature take its course." Nicholas's voice was careful. "Luca's not doing well, Doc. He's been unstable for years, but whatever was holding him together broke when you stopped him from pulling that trigger. He's barely speaking, barely eating. Boss thinks he wanted you to let him die." "I couldn't." "I know. You're too good for this world we live in." Nicholas stood. "The offer stands. Safe house, money, protection. Or you can walk away from all of it and testify and let the system handle everything. Your choice." He left the envelope and disappeared before Mara could respond. She spent the next 2 days in the hospital. Physical therapy for her shoulder. Interviews with police detectives who asked the same questions 17 different ways. And media calls that the hospital staff blocked with increasing frustration. On day 3, Mara checked herself out against medical advice. She took a cab to the address Damien had written. North side of Chicago, quiet residential street. Brownstone tucked between 2 others that looked identical. She used the key Nicholas had included with the envelope and stepped inside. The safe house was immaculate. furnished, stocked with food and clothes in her exact size. A laptop on the kitchen counter with a note. Encrypted, untraceable. Use it however you want. Mara walked through empty rooms that felt like a life she could build if she wanted to. Comfortable, safe, anonymous, and completely wrong. She couldn't hide. Not anymore. Luca had taken that option away when he'd made her name public. Running meant spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if he'd somehow escape. Wondering if the next basement was waiting around the next corner. The only way forward was through. Mara pulled out the phone Nicholas had given her and called the number she'd been avoiding. Detective Morrison answered on the second ring. Miss Ellison, I want to testify. Full deposition. Everything I know, but I have conditions. What conditions? Protection. Real protection. Federal witness protection if necessary. And I want immunity for anyone who helped me survive. That includes Damian Moretti and his associates. Silence stretched across the line. That's a big ask, Morrison said finally. I'm the only witness who can put Luca Moretti away for the rest of his life. I'd say that's worth negotiating. I'll talk to the prosecutor. Where are you? Somewhere safe. I'll come to you when we have a deal in writing. She ended the call before he could argue. 3 hours later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Mara. Damian's voice, raw, exhausted. Nicholas said you called the police. I'm testifying. I know. Morrison's office reached out about the immunity deal. They're willing to negotiate. Good. You don't have to do this. You can disappear. I can make it happen. I can't run for the rest of my life, Damian, and I won't let Luca win by making me too afraid to stand up. He's not going to trial. The words came out flat, final. Mara's blood went cold. What did you do? Nothing yet. But he's getting worse. The doctors I brought in say he's having a complete psychological breakdown, catatonic most of the time. When he does speak, it's just your name over and over. He's destroying himself from the inside. Then get him real help, psychiatric care, a hospital. And when he's lucid enough to escape, when he comes after you again, then I'll deal with it. But I won't have his death on my conscience. Why do you care? Damian's voice cracked slightly. After everything he did to you, why do you care if he lives or dies? Because I'm not like you. The words came out harder than Mara intended. I don't get to decide who lives and who dies. I save lives, even the ones that probably don't deserve saving. That's who I am. And if I let you kill him, I become something else. Something I won't recognize in the mirror. Silence. You're wrong about one thing, Damian said quietly. You are like me, more than you want to admit. We're both trying to save people who can't be saved. We just use different methods. Then prove me right. Turn Luca over to the authorities. Let the system handle him. The system doesn't work for people like us. Then make it work. You have lawyers, money, connections. Use them for something other than covering up crimes. Another long silence. I'll think about it, Damian said finally. But Mara? If he gets loose, if he comes after you again, I won't hesitate. I know. The line went dead. Mara sat in the empty safe house, wondering if she'd just saved Luca's life or signed her own death warrant. The next morning, Mara walked into the federal prosecutor's office wearing the clothes Damian had left for her and carrying nothing except the phone Nicholas had provided. Detectives Morrison and Chen were waiting with two federal prosecutors who looked like they'd been awake for 48 hours straight. The deposition took 6 hours. Mara told them everything, every detail she could remember. The parking garage, the basement, the food, the chains, Luca's face, his voice, the way he'd smiled while she begged, Damian's rescue, the attack on the estate, the gas station confrontation. They recorded everything, took photos of her healing wounds, documented the scars on her wrists where chains had cut through skin. By the time they finished, Mara felt hollowed out, empty, like she'd given away pieces of herself she'd never get back. This is enough for charges, one of the prosecutors said. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, attempted murder. Luca Moretti is looking at life without parole. If you can find him, Mara said. We will. And when we do, you'll testify? Yes. Even knowing it puts a target on your back? The target's already there. Testifying just makes it official. The prosecutor smiled grimly. You're braver than most witnesses we work with. I'm not brave. I'm angry. There's a difference. They released her 3 hours later with a protective detail, 2 federal marshals who would shadow her until Luca was in custody. Mara hated it immediately, hated having strangers follow her everywhere, hated being reduced to a victim who needed constant protection. But she was alive, and Luca would face justice. That had to be enough. On day 7 after the shooting, Damien called again. I'm turning him over. No greeting, just the statement. When? Tonight. Federal building, full custody transfer. I've negotiated immunity for my organization in exchange for delivering him and providing evidence of his crimes. You're giving up your own brother. I'm cutting out a cancer before it kills everything I've built. Damien's voice was hollow. You were right. I can't become him, and keeping him alive means enabling what he is. So I'm handing him to people who can lock him away forever. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because it's the only way forward that doesn't end with more bodies. Damien, stay safe, Mara. He ended the call. That night, Mara sat in the safe house watching news coverage of Luca Moretti being transferred into federal custody. Footage showed him being led from an unmarked van into the building, flanked by a dozen armed agents. He looked smaller than she remembered, broken, like something essential had been scooped out and discarded. She should feel relief, satisfaction, justice. Instead, she felt empty. 3 months ago, she'd been a nurse working double shifts and complaining about student loans. Now she was a federal witness who'd destroyed one criminal empire and saved another from self-destruction. Her phone buzzed. Text from Nicholas. Boss wants to see you. Says it's important. Your call. Mara stared at the message. She should say no. Should maintain distance. The prosecution had made it clear that fraternizing with Damien Moretti would complicate her testimony. But she typed back, where? The address came through immediately. A restaurant, public, safe. Mara told her protective detail she was going for dinner. They followed at a discreet distance as she took a cab to the address Nicholas had provided. The restaurant was small, Italian, family-owned based on the photos covering every wall. Damien sat alone in a back booth, wearing dark jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suits. He looked different without the armor of expensive clothes, almost human. Mara slid into the seat across from him. You shouldn't be here, she said. Probably not, but I needed to see you before everything changes. Everything's already changed. It's about to get worse. Damien pushed a folder across the table. Luca's lawyers are filing a motion to declare him mentally incompetent to stand trial. They're arguing he had a psychotic break and shouldn't be held criminally responsible. Mara's stomach dropped. Can they do that? With enough money and the right psychiatrists? Probably. He'll end up in a psychiatric facility instead of prison. Minimum security. Possibility of release if doctors determine he's no longer a threat. He'll get out. Eventually, maybe 5 years, maybe 10, but yeah, he'll get out. So all of this was for nothing. Not nothing. He's off the streets now, and by the time he's released, you'll be long gone. New identity, new life. The marshals will make sure of it. Mara wanted to flip the table, wanted to scream. Instead, she asked, what will you do? What I've always done. Run my empire. Stay one step ahead of the law. Try not to become the monster everyone thinks I am. You're not a monster. I've killed people, Mara. Ordered deaths. Destroyed lives. The fact that I feel guilty about it doesn't change what I am. It changes everything. Monsters don't feel guilt. Damien looked at her with those cold, lethal eyes that weren't quite as cold anymore. You see the best in people who don't deserve it. Maybe, but I've also seen enough monsters to know the difference, and you're not one. What am I then? Mara considered the question. Really considered it. You're someone who was born into darkness and spent his whole life trying to find light. That's not a monster. That's just human. Something shifted in Damien's expression, softened. I wish I'd met you before any of this happened, before Luca, before you knew what my world really was. Would it have been different? Probably not, but maybe. He reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused. For what it's worth, the 2 weeks you spent at my estate were the closest thing to peaceful I've felt in years. You made me remember there are people worth protecting, worth becoming better for. Mara's throat tightened. Damien, I know. You're leaving. Witness protection. New life. It's the right choice. But I needed you to know that you changed something in me. Made me believe I could be more than what my father built. Then be more. Walk away from it. Start over. I can't. Too many people depend on me. Too many enemies would take the opportunity to destroy everything. This is who I am. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. But knowing you exist somewhere out there, living a good life, will be enough. He stood to leave. Wait, Mara said. What if I don't want to disappear? Damien froze. What? What if I stay, testify, see this through, and then figure out what comes next? You'd be in danger, constant danger. People in my world don't forgive witnesses. I've been in danger for months. I'm tired of running from it. Mara, I can't protect you from everything. I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking if there's a version of this where we don't walk away from each other. Damien stared at her like she'd spoken a language he didn't understand. You saved my brother's life, testified against him, made yourself a target, and now you're saying you want to stay in a world that already tried to destroy you. I'm saying I don't know what I want yet, but I know running away without trying feels like letting Luca win again. This isn't about Luca anymore. Then what is it about? Damien moved back to the booth, sat down across from her, studied her face like he was memorizing every detail. It's about whether I'm selfish enough to let you risk everything for something that might not work, he said quietly. Whether I'm good enough to deserve someone who sees me as more than a criminal. Whether we can build something real in a world that's designed to tear people like us apart. And I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Mara smiled, first real smile in months. Then let's find out. Outside the restaurant, federal marshals waited. Media trucks were already circling. Tomorrow the trial would begin. Luca would face justice, and Mara would have to decide whether to disappear into witness protection or build something new from the ruins of everything she'd lost. But tonight, sitting across from a man who'd spent his entire life drowning in darkness, Mara felt something she hadn't felt since that parking garage 3 months ago. Hope. And for the first time, she believed it might actually be enough. The trial began on a Monday morning in late March. Mara sat in the witness waiting room wearing a navy suit the prosecutors had picked out because it looked professional without being threatening. Her shoulder still ached when she moved wrong. Physical therapy twice a week helped, but some wounds ran deeper than muscle and bone. Detective Morrison appeared in the doorway. They're ready for you. Mara stood. Her legs felt steady. That was something. 3 months ago, she could barely walk. Now she was about to walk into a federal courtroom and testify against the man who'd kept her chained in darkness. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Wood paneling, high ceilings, rows of benches filled with reporters, legal observers, and people who looked like they'd never missed a high-profile trial in their lives. At the defense table sat Luca Moretti, flanked by 3 attorneys who probably cost more per hour than Mara used to make in a week. Luca looked different, thinner, paler. His expensive suit hung loose on a frame that had lost weight, but it was his eyes that made Mara's breath catch. Empty, completely empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made him human. He didn't look at her when she entered. The bailiff swore her in. Mara placed her hand on the Bible and promised to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was about to destroy a man by being honest while the man who'd saved her had built an empire on lies. The prosecutor was a woman named Sarah Vance, mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She approached the witness stand with the confidence of someone who'd sent dozens of criminals to prison and planned to make Luca number whatever came next. Miss Ellison, can you tell the court where you were on the night of November 18th? Mara took a breath. Leaving Chicago Memorial Hospital after a double shift. I was an ER nurse. It was around 3:40 in the morning. And what happened? Someone attacked me in the parking garage, drugged me. When I woke up, I was chained in a basement. Can you describe the basement? Concrete floor, no windows, completely dark except when someone brought food. There was a bare bulb overhead, but it was never turned on while I was conscious. The chains were bolted into the ceiling. I could stand, but couldn't reach the walls. It was freezing, always freezing. How long were you held there? 3 months and 6 days. And during that time, did you see your captor? Yes, Multiple times a week. He brought food, water. Sometimes he just watched me. Can you identify that person in this courtroom? Mara looked directly at Luca for the first time. He still didn't meet her eyes, just stared at the table in front of him like it held answers to questions only he could hear. Yes, Luca Moretti, the defendant. The prosecutor spent the next hour walking Mara through every detail. The conditions, the psychological torture, the moment Damien had broken down the door, the attack on the estate, the gas station confrontation. Mara answered every question with clinical precision, falling back on nursing training that taught you to compartmentalize trauma and focus on facts. But when Vance asked, "Did the defendant ever explain why he took you?" Mara had to pause. He said he wanted to prove something to his brother, that he needed to become someone important enough to matter. He thought destroying me would make Damien pay attention. And did it work? Yes, but not the way he wanted. Damien didn't become more like his brother. He became more determined to stop him. The defense attorney objected. Judge sustained it. Vance moved on. Vance moved. When the prosecutor finished, Luca's lead attorney stood. His name was Gerald Hutchins, and he had the kind of polished arrogance that came from never losing a case he cared about. Miss Ellison, you've testified that my client held you captive for over 3 months. During that time, did he ever physically assault you? He chained me in a basement and starved me. That's assault. But did he strike you, rape you, cause direct physical harm beyond the conditions of your imprisonment? Mara's jaw clenched. No. And after Damien Moretti rescued you, you spent 2 weeks living in his estate. Is that correct? Yes. Were you free to leave during that time? I was told it wasn't safe. But were you physically restrained, locked in a room, prevented from calling authorities? No. So you chose to stay with a known organized crime figure rather than contact police immediately after your rescue. I was recovering from 3 months of captivity. I wasn't in a position to make demands. But you were in a position to provide medical care to Mr. Moretti's criminal associates. In fact, you set up an entire clinic on his property, treated gunshot wounds, knife injuries, injuries sustained during criminal activities. The courtroom murmured. Mara felt heat rise in her face. I'm a nurse. People were hurt. I helped them. You helped known criminals evade proper medical care and police scrutiny. I helped human beings who were bleeding. That's what nurses do. Hutchins smiled like he'd won something. And during your time at the estate, did you develop feelings for Damien Moretti? Objection! Vance was on her feet. Relevance? Goes to witness credibility, Your Honor. If Miss Ellison has romantic involvement with one brother while testifying against the other, it impacts her testimony. The judge considered. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, counselor. Hutchins turned back to Mara. Did you develop feelings for Damien Moretti? Mara wanted to lie, wanted to protect whatever fragile thing existed between her and Damien, but she'd sworn to tell the truth. I don't know what I feel about him. He saved my life. He gave me space to heal. But he's also a criminal who runs an organization built on violence. I'm grateful and conflicted, and honestly, I don't know how to categorize any of it. Would you say you're emotionally compromised? I'd say I'm a human being who survived something terrible and is trying to figure out what comes next. If that's compromised, then yeah, I'm compromised. No further questions. Mara was excused. She walked out of the courtroom on legs that felt like water and collapsed into a chair in the witness room. Morrison brought her water. She drank it without tasting anything. You did good, he said. I feel like I just got torn apart. That's his job. But the jury heard what matters. You were kidnapped, tortured, and the evidence backs up every word you said. Hutchins can raise questions about your relationship with Damien, but he can't change the facts of what his client did. The trial lasted 6 more days. Expert witnesses testified about the physical evidence, the basement, the chains, DNA samples, security footage from the gas station showing Luca holding a gun to Mara's head. Federal agents detailed the investigation, Damien's cooperation in exchange for immunity, the psychiatric evaluation that determined Luca understood the difference between right and wrong when he committed the crimes. The defense argued mental illness, childhood trauma, a family history of violence that had warped Luca's perception of acceptable behavior. They brought in psychiatrists who testified about psychotic breaks and dissociative episodes, but they couldn't explain away the planning, the surveillance, the 3 months of calculated imprisonment. On the 8th day, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. Luca didn't react, just sat there with that same empty expression while the judge read the charges one by one. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault, attempted murder. Each one carrying maximum sentences that would add up to life without possibility of parole. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Mara watched from the gallery as federal marshals led Luca away in handcuffs. He still didn't look at her, didn't look at anyone, just shuffled forward like a ghost being pulled toward whatever came after death. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed, cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. Mara's protective detail formed a barrier and pushed through to the waiting car. She climbed in and didn't look back. That night, Damien called. "Congratulations, you won." It doesn't feel like winning. It never does. But he's off the streets. That's what matters. What happens to him now? Federal supermax. 23 hours a day in a cell, no contact with other inmates, no chance of escape. He'll die there. Mara closed her eyes. I keep waiting to feel relief or satisfaction. Something, but all I feel is tired. That's normal. Justice isn't cathartic. It's just necessary. When did you become philosophical? Around the time a stubborn nurse made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Damien's voice softened. The prosecutors told me you're being placed in witness protection. New identity, new city, fresh start. They recommended it. I haven't decided yet. Mara, I know what you're going to say. That it's safer. That staying in Chicago makes me a target. That walking away is the smart choice. I was going to say that I'll miss you. But yeah, all that other stuff too. Mara's throat tightened. What if I don't want to walk away? Then you stay, and we figure it out. But I need you to understand what that means. My world doesn't forgive easily. People I've crossed will see you as leverage. You'll need security for years, maybe forever. Your life won't be normal. My life stopped being normal the night I was kidnapped. I'm done pretending it'll ever go back to what it was. So what do you want? Mara considered the question, really considered it. I want to finish my testimony at sentencing. I want to look Luca in the eyes when the judge hands down the sentence. And then I want to decide who I am now, not who I was before, who I am after everything that's happened. And then we'll see. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for April 15th. Mara spent the 2 weeks in between trying to rebuild something resembling a life. She moved out of the safe house into a small apartment in a neighborhood with good security, started physical therapy 5 days a week, went for walks along Lake Michigan just to prove to herself she could be outside without fear. Nicholas checked on her twice a week. Sophia came by once, still moving stiffly from her injuries, but alive and sharp as ever. They didn't talk about Damien, didn't talk about the organization or the empire or the darkness that still existed just beneath the surface of Chicago's polished exterior. They talked about recovery, about survival, about what came after trauma when the adrenaline wore off and you were left with just yourself and the weight of everything you'd endured. On the morning of the sentencing, Mara woke before dawn. She stood at her window watching the sun rise over the lake and thought about basements, about chains, about a young man who'd been so desperate to matter that he destroyed an innocent person to prove a point. She dressed carefully. Navy suit again, professional, strong. The woman she was becoming instead of the woman she'd been. The courtroom was packed. Victims' rights advocates, media, legal observers, and in the front row, wearing an expensive suit and sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in his face, sat Damien Moretti. He nodded once when Mara entered. She nodded back. Luca was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and chains. He looked even thinner than at trial. Hollowed out, like he was disappearing from the inside. When the bailiff positioned him at the defense table, Luca finally looked up. His eyes met Mara's. For a moment, she saw something flicker there, recognition maybe, or regret. Then it was gone, replaced by that same emptiness. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The proceedings began. Before I hand down sentencing, Judge Patricia Winters said, I'm allowing victim impact statements. Miss Ellison, if you'd like to address the court. Mara stood, walked to the podium, looked directly at Luca. I don't know what you wanted from me. she said quietly. I've spent months trying to understand, trying to find logic in something that had no logic. You took me because I existed, because destroying me would hurt your brother, because you needed to matter, and that was the only way you knew how. Luca's face remained blank. But here's what you didn't understand, Mara continued. You didn't destroy me. You tried. You came close. But I'm still here, still standing, still fighting. And every day I wake up and choose to keep living is a day you lose. Every time I help someone, every time I refuse to be afraid, every time I remember that I'm more than what you tried to make me. That's your failure, not mine. She paused, gathering herself. I don't forgive you. I don't think I ever will. But I also don't hate you. Because hate would mean you still matter. And you don't. You're just a cautionary tale about what happens when you mistake cruelty for strength. When you confuse destruction with importance, you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell. I'll spend the rest of mine free. And that's the only justice that matters. Mara stepped back. The courtroom was silent. Judge Winters looked at Luca. Does the defendant wish to make a statement? Luca's attorneys whispered to him. He shook his head. Very well. Judge Winters opened the sentencing document. Luca Moretti, you have been found guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault, and attempted murder. These crimes were not committed in passion or desperation. They were calculated, methodical, designed to inflict maximum psychological damage on an innocent person. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the suffering you caused, and based on psychiatric evaluations, you pose a continued danger to society. She paused. I am sentencing you to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will be held in administrative maximum security. No contact visits, no communication with the outside world except through monitored channels. You will spend the rest of your natural life paying for what you did to Miss Ellison and anyone else you harmed along the way. The gavel came down. It was over. Marshals led Luca away. He didn't look back, didn't say anything. Just shuffled out of the courtroom like a man already dead. Mara sat down, legs suddenly weak. It was over. Actually over. Luca would never hurt anyone again. Would die in a concrete box hundreds of miles away from everyone he'd ever known. She should feel victorious, vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. Outside the courthouse, Damien was waiting by a black car. He'd ditched the sunglasses. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. But when he saw Mara, something in his expression softened. You okay? He asked. I don't know. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. He gestured to the car. Can I give you a ride somewhere? Where are you going? Nowhere specific. Just away from here. Mara considered. Her protective detail was waiting. The marshals wanted to debrief her about witness protection options. The media was circling for statements. She got in Damien's car anyway. They drove in silence through Chicago streets, past the hospital where Mara used to work, past the estate where she'd spent 2 weeks healing, past landmarks that belonged to a life that felt like it had happened to someone else. Finally, Damien pulled into a park overlooking the lake, cut the engine, sat there staring at water that stretched toward the horizon. He's my brother, Damien said quietly. Was my brother. I don't know what tense to use anymore. He's still your brother. He's just not your responsibility. He was always my responsibility. From the moment our father died and left me in charge, I was supposed to keep him from becoming what he became. I failed. You can't save people from themselves. I should have tried harder. Mara turned in her seat to face him. Damien, you spent 15 years cleaning up after him, paying off victims, making problems disappear. You gave him every chance. He chose this, not you. Did he? Or did I enable him by never saying no, by always fixing things before they got too bad? You're not responsible for his choices. Then why does it feel like I am? Mara didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence, watching the lake. Seagulls circled overhead. Joggers passed on the path. Normal people living normal lives while two damaged people tried to figure out what came next. The prosecutors want me in witness protection, Mara said finally. I know. They say it's the safest option. New identity, new city, complete break from everything here. They're probably right. But I'd never see you again. Damien looked at her, really looked at her. Is that what you want, to see me again? I don't know what I want. 3 months ago, I wanted to go home after a shift and sleep for 12 hours. Now home doesn't exist. That person doesn't exist. I'm someone new, and I don't know who that person is yet. So figure it out. Take the protection. Start over. Build a life that doesn't include criminals and courtrooms and trauma. And you? I'll keep doing what I do. Run my empire. Try to be slightly less of a monster than my father was. Hope that somehow, somewhere, I made a difference. You made a difference to me. Damien's jaw tightened. Mara, I'm not saying I love you. I'm not saying this is some grand romance. I'm saying you saved my life. And then you gave me space to heal, and you turned your own brother over to authorities instead of handling it your way. You made choices that went against everything your world stands for. That matters. It doesn't change what I am. No, but it changes what you could be, if you wanted to. And what's that? Someone who walks away, who builds something new, who proves that being born into darkness doesn't mean you die there. Damien laughed bitterly. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying, but so is everything else. They sat there for a long time, not talking, just existing in the same space while the world moved around them. Eventually, Damien started the car again. Where do you want me to take you? The apartment. I need to think. He drove her back to the building where she'd been staying, parked in front, made no move to turn off the engine. Take the protection, he said. Disappear. Build something good. You deserve that. What if I don't want to disappear? Then you stay, and I'll do everything I can to keep you safe. But Mara, you need to understand something. Staying means always looking over your shoulder, always wondering if someone from my past is going to use you as leverage, always living with security and fear and the knowledge that loving someone like me comes with a price. And if I'm willing to pay it, then I'd ask why. Why you'd choose this when you could have anything else. Mara reached for the door handle, paused. Because walking away feels like letting Luca win, like admitting that what he did destroyed me permanently, and I refused to give him that. She got out before Damien could respond. 3 days later, Mara declined witness protection. The marshals tried to change her mind, explain the risks, the danger, the statistical likelihood that someone from Damien's world would eventually come after her. She listened to all of it and said no anyway. Instead, she took the money Damien had given her and used it to rent a small house on the north side of Chicago. Nothing fancy, just a place with good security and enough space to breathe. She enrolled in a graduate program for trauma counseling, started working with a therapist who specialized in PTSD, joined a support group for kidnapping survivors. She rebuilt herself piece by piece. Nicholas checked on her weekly. Sophia came by for coffee. Marco, the first patient she'd treated in Damien's makeshift clinic, sent flowers on the anniversary of his surgery. Slowly, quietly, she built a network of people who understood what survival actually looked like. Damien stayed away. For months, Mara heard nothing from him. She told herself that was good. That distance meant safety. That he was protecting her the only way he knew how, by removing himself from her life entirely. She told herself that, didn't quite believe it. 6 months after the sentencing, Mara was leaving her therapist's office when she noticed the car following her. Black SUV, tinted windows, professional tail. Her heart rate spiked, old instincts kicking in. She pulled out her phone, ready to call Nicholas. The SUV pulled up beside her, window rolled down. Damien sat in the driver's seat. "Get in," he said. "Are you kidnapping me?" "Would you call the police if I was?" "Probably not. But I'd be annoyed about the irony." Despite everything, Damien smiled. "Just get in, please." Mara got in. They drove to the same park overlooking the lake, same spot where they'd parked 6 months ago. The water was calmer now. Summer had turned Chicago into something almost beautiful. "I've been trying to stay away," Damien said without preamble. "Figured it was safer for you if I wasn't around." "How's that working out?" "Terrible. Turns out I'm selfish. Join the club." He turned to look at her. "You're different, stronger, more settled. Therapy helps. So does not being chained in a basement." I'm joking. Dark humor is part of recovery, apparently." "How are you? Really?" Mara considered the question. "Some days are good. Some days I wake up convinced I'm back in the basement, and it takes 20 minutes to remember where I am. I have nightmares about Luca, about you dying, about a dozen scenarios where everything goes wrong, but I'm also in school, making progress, building something new. That's good. It is. So why are you here? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Because I've spent 6 months trying to be the responsible one, the one who walks away, who lets you build a life without complications. And I realized something. What? I'm tired of being responsible. I'm tired of doing what's expected. I'm tired of living in darkness because that's what my father wanted, what my family built. He turned to face her fully. I'm tired of pretending I don't care about you. Mara's breath caught. Damien, I know I'm a criminal. I know I've done terrible things. I know being with me means danger and complications and a life that will never be normal. But you make me want to be better, want to build something that isn't built on fear and violence. And I'm selfish enough to ask if you'd be willing to try that with me. Try what exactly? Life. Whatever that looks like. I'm not asking you to marry me or move in or make any grand declarations. I'm asking if you'd be willing to have dinner, go for walks, figure out what we are when we're not in crisis mode. Mara studied his face, saw exhaustion, saw hope, saw a man who'd spent his entire life being what other people needed and was finally asking for something for himself. I have conditions, she said. Okay, no more illegal operations, no more violence unless it's actual self-defense, no more living like a target. I can't just walk away from everything overnight. There are people who depend on me, legitimate businesses that employ hundreds. Walking away means leaving them vulnerable. Then transition, slowly. Build something legal. Use your money and connections for something other than crime. And if I can't, then we can't do this, because I won't survive loving someone who might die violently tomorrow. I've had enough trauma. I need stability. Damien nodded slowly. That's fair. I'll start transitioning operations, put managers in place, move money into legitimate investments. It'll take time. I have time. And while I'm doing that, we figure out what normal looks like. Dates, conversations that don't involve life or death decisions, building trust that isn't based on survival. I don't know how to do normal. Neither do I, so we'll learn together. Damien reached across the center console and took her hand. His palm was warm, solid, real. I can't promise it'll be easy, he said quietly. Nothing worth having ever is. I can't promise I won't screw it up. Neither can I. I can't promise we'll work. Then we won't promise anything. We'll just try. Damien lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. I'm in if you are. Mara smiled. First truly genuine smile in 6 months. Then I'm in. They sat there holding hands while the sun set over Lake Michigan. Two damaged people who'd survived darkness and were choosing to build something in the light. It wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't a guarantee, just a possibility. But possibilities were enough, because Mara had learned something crucial over the past year. Survival wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking apart and choosing to put yourself back together differently, stronger, more honest about your scars. She'd been kidnapped, tortured, forced to testify against a monster, had watched a man struggle to become more than the darkness that birthed him. And through all of it, she'd learned the most important truth about being human. You don't get to choose what happens to you, but you absolutely get to choose who you become after. Mara chose strength, chose healing, chose the terrifying possibility of loving someone who was just as broken as she was. And for the first time since a parking garage in November, she chose hope. Not the blind, naive hope of someone who'd never been hurt, but the earned, hard-won hope of someone who'd survived hell and decided that wasn't how her story ended. Outside the car, Chicago glowed with evening lights. Inside, two people sat holding hands, building something fragile and new from the ruins of everything they'd lost. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect enough.